Jessica Thomas, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself in a second. But before we get started with the program, I just wanted to thank our sponsors, Novartis. Without them, we would not have the MS Mental Wellness Chat. And then, of course, without MS Views and News, we would not have this mental wellness chat either. It was the idea of MS Views and News to bring this to the MS community, and it has helped to meet a lot of different needs during COVID, and now that we're getting a little bit out of COVID. So today we're going to talk about care, and we're going to talk about care in a couple dimensions. And the couple dimensions that we're going to talk about it is care for the care partner. We're going to talk about caring for ourselves, and we're going to talk about care and relationships. So it's going to be in a lot of different dimensions. And so if you have a care partner with you on today's chat, that's great. If you don't, that's great. And no matter what your situation is that you will benefit from the program today. So I want to assure you that. So let's talk about it. This is not the cutest little elephant, but I wanted to start with this slide. So let's talk about it. So this program today is about care for yourself, care for the care partner, care and relationships, and how MS integrates into this. But before we get started, I just want to say the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room right now is it's the night before Thanksgiving, and holidays are kind of starting. Some of you may be with people and families, and you may be having big plans tomorrow, and some of you may not. So I just wanted to make a call attention to it, and to say if you're however you're spending your day tomorrow, if you're feeling stressed, I hope this helps to kind of help recenter you a little bit. If you're feeling lonely about what you're going to be doing this weekend, I hope that you reach out and you practice some resiliency techniques, and you reach out to someone and maybe hang out, or see if you can have a conversation, or you do something that helps you to pass the time. If you're feeling really stressed about what you need to do, maybe finding some ways to manage stress and maybe kind of reduce some of the stress. Maybe it's shorten the list a little bit, or maybe it's adjusting expectations a little. But I just wanted to mention that because I think the night before a holiday is worth mentioning, that it can be a little bit conflicting sometimes. And I always like to say you're not alone. So no matter how you showed up on today's call, I want you to know that you are not alone. There are people that are probably going through similar experiences or feelings or challenges, might be celebrating some of the same things. So I just wanted to remind us as a community on the mental wellness chat that we are not alone. So we'll go to our next slide. So we're going to start off, and we're going to start off in a positive resiliency measure using our chat box. What is something that you are grateful for? And it can be big, it can be small. I am big on practicing small things that I'm grateful for. So I am grateful for two things. Earlier today, I had a good conversation with a friend that I love talking with. And then the other thing that I am grateful for is I have a cup of coffee, and I love this coffee, and I make it usually every time before the mental wellness chat. So let's see what you guys are grateful for. So far, we don't have anybody measuring it or chiming in what they're grateful for. So while we're okay, so we have some people now. Grateful for for all the possible ailments that I don't have. Absolutely. Being alive since, and then grateful another grateful that I'm alive, and I have friends and a place to live. My family. I'm grateful for my husband. I'm grateful that I'm alive. I don't have, our mom is no longer living. Grateful that my adult children want to come home for Thanksgiving. Grateful for family. So practicing gratitude. This is a positive psychology resilience exercise, and this is one way we can take care of ourselves, is by practicing gratitude, and this is why we're doing this. And so when we can look at things that we are grateful for, big things like being alive, and you guys are mentioning that we have a couple more. I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful for stability, having parents who I can talk to, and having some mutual support. I'm grateful for family and friends. So there's a lot of things. What I'm going to challenge you guys to consider is practicing gratitude on a small level. And when I say a small level, so we're very grateful that we're alive, and we're grateful for family. We're grateful for community. We're grateful for those things. Grateful for people we're going to see, but also trying to find the little tiny things to be grateful for. And you'll see that sometimes that can help balance out some of the challenges too. So we're going to move on to our next slide, and I just wanted that to kind of help set our tone for a little bit. So today's chat, we're going to talk about care for the caregiver, caring for yourself, caring for your relationships. So this should apply to every single person. And we're going to start with, when we start, is talk about caring for yourself. So we'll move on to our next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk about stress because this is going to pair really well with how do we take care of ourselves. So I'm going to ask you in the chat, and so as I'm talking, I want you to put in the chat box, what are some of your signs of stress? We talk about this on the mental wellness chat, but I think it's really important that we know what our signs of stress are, so that way we can hopefully be on a proactive level, providing care for ourselves, but also on a reactive level. We know kind of when we're stressed, what we look like, how we feel, etc. So some indicators of stress, and then I'll read what you guys chime in. So there might be muscle tightness, your back or shoulders ache. You might have nightmares. You might not be able to sleep well. Might not be able to fall asleep. You might have pains in your body. You might feel restless. You might have mood swings. You might not want to hang out with other people. You might have struggle with carrying out everyday tasks, and you might have increased forgetfulness, and that can pair a little bit with cognitive fatigue. But you also might have feelings of despair, feeling overwhelmed, or anxious, etc. So some signs of that we have here in the group is so we have Dion, can have emotional eating or short-tempered. I can do both of those, so I can understand that. Kanita says fidgeting, and Nora says not thinking as clearly, and sometimes her eyes can be impacted and she doesn't see as clearly. Maddie says being hard on myself stresses me out, and feeling like I'm messing something up. So you probably even have some dialogue in your head, when you're feeling stressed about that. And then Marilyn said hello. So Marilyn, thank you for joining us. So stress is inevitable. So the next thing we're going to talk about as we dive into taking care of yourself is psychological flexibility. And this is important. So we'll move on to the next slide. So if an oxygen mask drops down, we need to put on the oxygen mask before helping others. Have many of you heard that kind of advice before, if you were ever to fly in an airplane? It's one of those pieces of advice that I've heard over and over again, and we've talked about with caregivers, but it's so true. And it's something that I had a really hard time as a parent thinking, why would I not put my son's oxygen mask on before I'd put my own? But the truth is if we don't take care of ourselves, then we struggle with taking care of other people or helping other people. So we're going to stay on this slide for just a second, and we're going to talk about psychological flexibility. And psychological flexibility is like a superpower for mental health and stress management. And it's trending, so you're going to hear more information, more resources about psychological flexibility, I think, as time goes on. But it's really allowing yourself to deal with stress in the moment. And so it's allowing yourself to be in the moment, being in the here and the now, and whatever is stressful. So maybe if you are having a lot of things to do tomorrow, or if you're feeling, actually, if you guys are feeling stressed about anything, write it down. If you're okay with me saying what the stressor is. But if you're feeling stressed about something, just feel free to put it in the question box. But so whatever it is with psychological flexibility, you're allowing yourself to be present in the moment. And then you start to diffuse, and what you're doing there is you're allowing yourself to think and watch your thinking and how you're thinking. And then you, with psychological flexibility, you have an acceptance, and that's the ability to open up thoughts that might be stressful, feelings or emotions that might be uncomfortable, and instead of like trying to fight them, or instead of trying to push them away, you just allow yourself to say, this is hard, or I'm frustrated. And so then you give yourself the awareness of where you are within these feelings. And then you circle back to what matters most. And then from there, and it's a part of acceptance and commitment therapy, this concept, but then from there, you say, okay, well, what matters most here? And the things that you value, and you let that guide your behaviors. But psychological flexibility is it's really a good beginning mindset to have when we're feeling stressed, because this allows us to deal with stressors, and we allow us to deal with the emotions that we go through when we're experiencing them. We have Patricia here that's been trying to use the Calm app for meditation, but it's really difficult to do every day, she says. And I always find myself needing to do things and putting myself last. We're going to talk a little bit about putting yourself first and caring for yourself first. That Calm app is an amazing app, but if we don't, and it's like exercise, using meditations and those type of things, if we don't do them and don't learn how to practice them, then they're kind of hard to do. So we're going to move on to our next slide. So this is a tool that I want us all to think about on an individual level, thinking about checking in with your battery. We do this maybe sometimes with MS, and we might do this from the take of, I have a lot of energy today. I know I use kind of like a battery model, thinking about fatigue, and sometimes when do I need to charge myself, so to say. But thinking about not only your physical energy with MS, but just kind of check your battery. How are you doing emotionally? How are you feeling? Do you need to be replenished? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling like you're kind of feeling drained? This kind of awareness of ourselves is super important. We've become a lot more skilled at being able to do this with MS. But if we have people in our lives that love us and care about us, encourage them to check into their battery too. How are they feeling? And so we're going to move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about taking care of you. So how do you do that? One, I would recommend to go back to a lot of these mental wellness chats, because there's tools in every single one on the YouTube channel. But it's really about managing your self-care, having realistic expectations, focusing on what you can do, communicating effectively with people, learning from our emotions, not pushing them away, but learning and leaning into them, getting help when needed. This is something we've talked about on the mental wellness chat quite a bit. Setting goals and working towards them. We're going to talk about that in a bit. And then exercising and eating well. So then I'm going to ask you, what matters to you? So that we're going to treat this like a question box. These two questions. What matters to you? What do you need? So I want you to think about that. And if you're so willing, in the question box, you can answer. So move on to the next slide. So answer these two questions. What matters to you and what do you need? Thinking about like what you need right now. So I will get us started. So what matters to me? Well, absolutely right now, in this very moment, you are what matter to me in this mental wellness chat. But generally, my family matters a lot to me, and the work and people that I work with. And what do I need? So I'm feeling pretty good energy wise today, but I know that I need to, in order to feel stressed tomorrow, that tonight I need to kind of plan and pre-pack anything that I need to have ready for our Thanksgiving. So that's what I'll kind of identify. So that's kind of my right here, right now. But you might be thinking bigger. So we have Dan and Jennifer said health and health. Absolutely. How, good health and how you define health matters, and what do you need? You absolutely need good health. Communication, Patricia said, is so difficult. I don't know what I'm wanting to say, but it's not coming out the right way. We're going to talk a little bit about communication. And it's real important for her to communicate well. So so I need to learn how to do that. Okay. So we might not solve that all today, Patricia, but we did do something on communication last month too. That might be good to look at. But yeah, communication is difficult. It's tricky, and we've got to learn how to communicate our needs. And we will talk about that too. Maddie said, what matters most, staying calm and calling friends tomorrow. So what he needs to do is call friends tomorrow. Very good, Maddie. So we're going to move on to our next slide. I know it sounds like we're going fast, but we have 3 tiers of things that we're going to cover here. So I want to make sure we touch base on all of them. So this tool here is going to be applicable to you if you're living with MS. It's going to be applicable to your anyone that loves you, a care partner, a caregiver, etc., a spouse, anyone. Thinking about when you were thinking about what do you need and what matters to you, creating an action plan is a pretty great way to help kind of meet your needs. So other questions you might be able to ask yourself are, what is it, things that you like to do? What could you do to take better care of yourself and to feel better? And it's just really identifying what are the things that you need, and so we can create a plan around that. Nora said what matters is stability for herself and those around her. She needs patience and communication, for me too. Okay. So we're going to move on to our next slide. So it's important to kind of figure out what is it that we need, and is this something that we can do an action plan around? So when I think about health, I think, when we think about health being really important, we can create an action plan around that very easily. And so when you're creating an action plan, you're thinking about, the what, the how, the when, and how often. You want to be pretty specific. What are you going to do? How much are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? And how often are you going to do it? Now, sometimes things are time limited. So we can use Maddie's example. What is he going to do? Well, Maddie lives with a roommate, and he would give me permission to share that. So Maddie has a roommate, but during the holidays, he's by himself. And so what is he going to do? So Maddie is going to plan to call his friends tomorrow. And what we would say is, Maddie, you can answer this if you want, but when are you going to call them? Because you have to make a plan on when you're going to do it. So it might be first thing in the morning. So the what would be, I'm going to reach out to my friends, how I'm going to call them. When are you going to do it? So you pick out a time. And then the how often that's a time limited event because it's about the holidays. So, but if it was about health, it might be about exercise or meal planning, etc. But I'll give you an example. So I do love to read. So I like to read fun books sometimes. And so this week I will read, which is my what, for a half hour in the mid-afternoon. And I will do this through the weekend. And that's my action plan. So we're going to move on to the next slide. So when you think about what matters to you and what is something that you would like to, or that you need, and then hearing a little bit about the action plan, I want you to think about, and you can contribute to this too, what is something that you would like to be intentional about? What is something that you would like for you to take care of you to be intentional about? We're going to move on to our next PowerPoint. You can still chime in on that question, but we're going to keep moving because we have a lot of content today. The next slide is about permission. So I talked a little bit about the action plan, and the action plan is very hardcore, like what, when, how, it's a great tool to really hone in. But the permission slip is actually a pretty cool tool to use as well. And so I would love for you, everyone on this call, or on this chat today, to think about what is something that you can give yourself permission for. And I would love if you would put it in the question box, because I think it's good for us to hear what we give permission for ourselves for. I am going to give myself permission for not having a super clean house all weekend. I just don't want to focus my energy there. I want to focus my energy on some other things. My house is kind of okay, but I'm not going to spend, like I did a couple weekends ago, cleaning all weekend. So I'm giving myself permission to relax, read a book, and not clean as much. What can you give yourself permission for that would help you through the weekend? What do you need? What matters to you? That kind of thing. So I hope that you guys continue to chime in on the box. We have here, let's see, let me move it so I can read it. Nora also said, keeping to make progress on her to-do list, organizing and cleaning. So you can give yourself permission to do things, and you can also give yourself permission to, to not do things, which is, I think, important. So we're going to move care to our next part, which is care for the caregiver. So this November is always the National Caregivers Month, and with MS, caregiving can look very different, actually starkly different. So caregiving can look like for someone who has very progressive disease. Caregiving may be someone who fully helps with transfers and helps with bathing and such. Some. There also the title care partner is used some, and I would give my husband the title care partner. Or he's someone who is in my life that loves me, knows I have MS and knows my limitations sometimes, and he pitches in and does a lot of things to help balance when my symptoms are high. So in the summer when I am really fatigued and not feeling as well, he pitches in and he does a lot more with dinner and meals, and he's always done all the things for my son in the mornings. So that's an important thing, is that a caregiver can look different. It doesn't have to be a caregiver, someone that is giving you care, for all your, activities of daily living, but that does happen. But it also can be just a support partner. So I want you to look at it from that perspective as I talk about it. Because care partners can be spouses, they can be parents, they can be children, not young children, hopefully, but they can be adult children. They can also be other family members. They can be also professional caretakers, etc. And care partners, and sometimes they can have conflicting feelings. There's great. There's great things and positive things about being a care partner, and I think that relationships are often strengthened from that. But it's also kind of natural sometimes, if you have a care partner, that they might feel a little bit stressed or overwhelmed. At times they might feel a little bit guilty I think that's a very common feeling. I've worked with a lot of caregivers for a lot of different diseases through the work I've done, and often it's common to as a care partner to feel a little bit guilty, or to feel like they have a higher burden sometimes, that they have to do things and help, and also at the same time they might be the only person that wants to help and do things too. So I know we don't have a lot of couples on today's call, but what I would say is that if you have someone that loves you and that pitches in a little bit more, is to always have the conversation about making sure that they're taking care of themselves, because it's really important to know that they are taking care of themselves. And so we have Dan and Jennifer are giving themselves permission to watch football. I love it. And with no guilt and no shame, watch as much football as you can and enjoy it. And then we have Patricia that says, I cause my husband a lot of frustration. It's primarily due to my ability to not communicate well and my short-term memory. And that can be a very frustrating thing for care partners, right? When the person that you're caring for, you love, is not able to communicate as well, or if there's memory issues sometimes. And there can be strategies around that. And I highly recommend working with your healthcare team or finding some strategies, but the communication we'll talk about a little bit too. So what are some positive things about, being a care partner? You're a sense of accomplishment. There's more compassion. You strengthen the memories that you have with your loved one, and there's opportunity, within the relationship. It's hard to be a care partner though, depending on the amount of stress or burden that you feel. So that's important. I think communication is really important, talking to your care partner. I know I have to ask my husband sometimes, are you feeling a little bit overwhelmed? Because he does everything with my son in the morning to help him get ready for school. But guess what? I have a teenager. And so he does everything in the evening too, because I go to bed super early. And so I have to check in and see where I can kind of balance out and help out. Because those are both my hard times, first thing in the morning and late in the evening. And so it's important to check in with your care partner and just say, how are you feeling? Are you feeling overwhelmed? And as a care partner, or as someone who loves someone with MS, being able to kind of check in with yourself and say, do I need something? Do I need support or help? Or am I feeling overwhelmed? Like we need to do good about checking in with ourselves and finding out how we're feeling. And so that way we can talk about it. Because if we don't know how we're feeling or what we need, then we don't know how to ask for help. And that goes for the care partner as well as it does for the person with MS. And if you weren't living with MS, just anyone in general. So here are a couple of steps to getting some help if you are a care partner, or if I think this could be just even transferable to yourself if you are not a care partner. Recognize that that caretaking, like any other job, is made up of a lot of different tasks. And also when you're living with MS and life and the responsibility, it's a lot of things to do, right? And sometimes we can do it all and sometimes we can't do it all. Recognize that asking for help is a sign of strength. And I think that's important. We have talked in this in the past about asking for help and how to ask for help. But it can be hard, I know, but allowing yourself to acknowledge that actually asking for help is a sign of strength. It's a resilience. It's a strategy of resilience. Another thing you can do is create a list of tasks that need to get done in any week. So be specific. People that often want to help don't know. They'll say, just let me know if you need any help. I'm sure you've had conversations with people in the past about this. And because there's no specific thing, it's hard to know what to tell them to do. And so it's good to have a list of, specific things that you need to have done. So that way, if anyone ever wants to help out, that they can. Group your tasks into categories. Another thing you can do is writing down your worries and sharing your lists with someone that you trust. And we're going to talk a little bit about care for your relationships. And so this is going to speak to care. So we've talked a little bit about caring for yourself. And I wanted to talk a little bit about care for the care partner, but I also want to talk a little bit about care just in your relationships in general. And the reason why is that relationships matter. We're going to move on to the next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about proactive relationship management. So what are some things that we can do to help be proactive in our relationships? I'm gonna pause here for just a second. So we have Patricia that's going to give herself permission to ask her husband, how are you doing today? What can I do to help you if you're stressed? Provide permission out loud to my husband that it's okay for him to have alone time. I'm so glad that you said all of those things, because that's really great feedback. Patricia, it's a really good idea to ask your spouse, how are you doing? Is there anything I can support you with today? And also reinforcing it's really important to have time alone, and it's okay. And because often care partners can feel guilty when they want to have time by themselves. And that's actually, and that kind of conversation is a really proactive relationship management tool. It's sometimes I'll ask my husband, I'll say, what does support look like for you today? Because I can assume what I think support looks like for him, but I might not know. And so, so checking in and kind of saying, how are you doing? How can I support you? Or what does support look like for you today? And giving him an opportunity to tell me. So some other proactive relationship management tools are, accepting your part in making your relationship a success. So this is any type of relationship. So this could be a friendship. This doesn't have to be romantic. I even think my relationship with my son, I have to really accept my part in making my relationship with my son a success as he's, a teenager, and it becomes awkward and harder to interact. And Kanita, you're asking for slides. I will see if we can get the link out to the slides later. So thank you for asking. But other proactive relationship management is so when you're, the ability in making your relationship a success is staying in touch with the people. It is relationships are give and take, and so making sure that that you're making those phone calls. Maddie, I'm so glad that you're doing that tomorrow, and that's an important thing to do. Also, just thinking about your relationships and how do you nurture them, and it's not just romantic that we're talking here. Also, for the romantic ones, but we can also say this is transferable to friendships too, is keeping your couple time sacred. So how we can transfer this to friends is keeping time, intentional time. If we don't make intentional time with people, what we find is that often we're too busy, right? I'm not sure if many of you experience this, but I experienced this even over the weekend, or as I was preparing for the weekend coming up, just trying to get people to go on walks and exercise and to do things. Everybody's kind of busy, and I think it's kind of a way that people have just became. It's just so easy to say we're busy, and so we have to be intentional with our relationships, and intentional takes planning and effort. And I know MS, we feel different, and and we sometimes can't plan too far in advance, but just know that relationships take intention and effort, as does self-care. So another thing would be is for proactive relationship management is to make sure the small things add up. And so if you think about it from a currency, or if you think about that battery example, with your relationships, are you fostering, are you charging your relationship with your friends? Are you making sure that that you're intentional, or is it something that that is going down? It's kind of thinking of it like a bank account, etc. So we're going to move on to our next slide. So committing to spending some regular quality time together, finding something that you enjoy doing together, trying something new, focusing on having fun. How many of you, and I'll just ask this, when is the last time that you did something fun and what did you do? And please contribute to this question because it's really important. I think these questions tend to be very inspiring to others. So when is the last time you did something fun and what did you do? And I will get us started. The last time I did something fun is I went to see some live music yesterday. And that was a really fun experience because it was something I normally won't do in my work week. So we're going to move on to our next slide while people are contributing. So also for relationships, tell your partner what you need. Don't make them guess. And that's really, that's an important thing as well, because if we don't communicate what we need, our partners don't know. And this goes to our friends, so other relationships as well. Managing stress. If we don't manage stress well, that impacts our relationships. And we could, we had even someone who mentioned, that they get really annoyed easily when they're stressed. Some people don't think as clearly, some are short-tempered. So we don't, if we are not managing our stress, then often it's affecting how we're interacting in our relationship. Recognizing what's important for your partner, or if it's not a romantic relationship, recognizing what's important to your friends, and be prepared for ups and downs because relationships are full of them. So we have some people that did some fun things. Julie went to a show. That is so great, Julie. And Dan and Jennifer are baking a pie for Thanksgiving. I just made my cranberry sauce not long ago. And that's actually pretty fun to bake and cook too sometimes if you don't have too much to do. So we're going to move on to our next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about communication now. So we're going to move one more over. So I talked a little bit about identifying needs. And the reason why this follows just the communication title slide is because if we don't know what we need, then we're not going to know how to communicate. And so there's an exercise called STOP. And I'm trying to think of what all the acronyms mean, or I can do the other 4 questions. But for STOP, I'm just going by my memory here. But for STOP, you literally stop yourself. And the T stands for taking a breath. So with taking a breath, you would breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, and you would maybe do that for a couple of cycles. So maybe for a count of breathing in for 4, out for 4 for maybe a count of 2 or 3 cycles. And then the O is really observing, like observing how you're feeling, thinking about what it is that you need. Are you feeling tired? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling pain, etc.? And then the P stands for then you come up with a plan. But I like the STOP acronym because it can at least give us a moment to pause and ask ourselves, what do we need? Because if we don't know what we need, we don't know how to ask for help. We'll move on to the next slide. And so if we don't make space for the communication, if we don't make effort, intention to talk about things, how can we expect for others to know what we need? And so I think that's an important thing to kind of keep at the forefront for care and thinking about self-care for ourselves, our relationships, and even for our care partners, for everyone. If we don't communicate what we need then others are not going to know what our needs are. Often we walk around and if you think about, often we hear about MS being that iceberg, that on the tippity top, you might see some of the symptoms, but really MS, a lot of the symptoms are invisible. Many people don't see that. Well, that goes for a lot of other needs too, is that for you as an individual, I think we're all in our own way kind of an iceberg, that you might see a little bit of what's going on, but you won't see everything that's hidden. And it's my job to let you know what I need help with. So I want to reiterate that point. We'll move on to our next slide. We have some more fun things. So Kanita went to see Black Panther sequel a few weeks ago, and she's going to go to Disneyland with a friend soon. That's really fun. We've got to have fun in our lives, and we have to plan fun, and that's important for all of our relationships, but it's important for ourselves too, to have things that we look forward to. So in terms of communication, there's a such thing, 5 magic minutes. And Patricia did a really good example of things that she could do to ask her husband. But I think we sometimes think that communication takes a lot of effort. But maybe if and it takes a lot of work and effort, but maybe if we could get into some habits of a couple minutes a day, checking in with the people that love us, or some of our primary people in our lives, and asking them how their day was. What is something that they were grateful for? Did they have any challenges? And I think it's important to ask this and also tell this. So you could say, I'm really grateful for the pie that we just baked. What are you grateful for? Finding what is it, getting a smaller window of what's going on and what went on for the person's day. And I think also being prepared to kind of share that. So you might be able to initiate kind of within a 5-minute span of checking in and just, letting your loved one know, or letting your friend know kind of how your day was, what just kind of the highlights, the lowlights within 5 minutes, and kind of find out what theirs are. And that's really helpful from a communication standpoint, because often we can go side by side and live right beside someone, talk to them all day and not know those things. So it's an intentional way to communicate, but 5 magic minutes, thinking about the ability to do that. And I can tell you that can make a really big difference, that kind of check-in with each other. And it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. Could be your roommate, for all that matters, but checking in and just having a real conversation. And we'll move on to the next slide. So we're going to talk here about communicating some of the tough stuff. And I wasn't sure where I wanted to put this, because initially I was thinking about putting it with the care partner stuff, and then with relationships, because it's relevant to all. But I think it's important for us to make space to communicate and talk about the tough stuff. And this is the stuff that's so easily, it's so easy to put on the shelf, to tuck it away, to not want to think about it. But if we make space to talk about some of the challenging stuff, then it really does free actually a lot more time and a lot more emotional energy later. So for instance, there is times when talking about, that my husband and I might talk about my MS, or you might talk about your MS with your partner because you're worried, or you have to make a treatment decision, or you've noticed symptoms changing. Sorry, my dog was making some noise. Or you may may find that you need to talk about some of the changes that you have in your life. For example, you may become empty nesters, or you may have had challenges in your relationship, or it may some changes with your job. The ability, you might have had some symptoms that have changed your ability to work the way that you've been able to work before. Whatever it is, it's really hard to talk about the tough stuff, but if we make space to talk about it sometimes, then it can be a lot easier for you to take on the tough stuff with your support system. What is something, and I'll just ask you, and you can feel free to contribute if you would like, what is something that's kind of tough to talk about with MS? Either from the perspective of a care partner, or from the perspective of somebody living with MS. And I'll get us started, because I from the perspective of the clinician working with patients, that I find that that often people may struggle with talking about their relationship and intimacy. So as a professional, I've seen that quite a bit, and how how things might have changed because of that. Or personally, some of the tough things have been treatment changes, and how to talking with my partner about treatment changes over my MS, and how that's made me feel. So we don't have anyone in the question box sharing anything, but the important thing is to know is that we've got to communicate and talk about the tough stuff and make space for it. So it doesn't have to, that's not the 5-minute conversation. That's good to communicate and have this is making space on an intentional day time, just to kind of really just talk about how we're really feeling. Okay, we'll move on to okay, so we've got actually some people chiming in. So talking about depression is tough. Absolutely. And talking about mental health can be tough. Other people's unrealistic expectations. Absolutely. I think that when we talk about expectations and how we are able to we have different expectations, and how maybe one person's is not realistic to what your capacity or ability to do something is. We have someone that said psychosis episodes and what's real and what may have been, let's see, made up or exacerbated in my head. So again, mental health challenges. So sometimes that can be hard too, but we've got to make space to talk about mental health and expectations. Talk about tough stuff. Let's see. Why I'm not able to do my share of household tasks, so why there might be an imbalance of some tasks. And Dan and Jennifer had some really good advice, and it's really too talking about the tough stuff, but don't be mean, right? We we have to create a safe place to be able to share these feelings, so we feel comfortable talking. And the idea is that when we're talking, we're not arguing. That it's a safe place that you can have the ability to really talk and express how you're feeling. And we have someone that says, that it's not me, the forgetfulness and not wanting to do anything. And that's I think a hallmark too, is being able to kind of find ways to communicate, which we've talked about in some of the other mental wellness chats, talking about some of the symptoms and the experiences, because that's really important too. Because we need to find a way to communicate how we're feeling, but then also the recipient needs to know that when we're communicating what we're experiencing, it may be something invisible that they don't see, but it's our reality. And then Dan and Jennifer said, always be honest. And that's so true. It's a cornerstone of a healthy relationship, right? Is being able to be honest. And again, we need that safe place and that safe space to be able to do that. So what is something that you're planning to be intentional about in regards to your care going forward. We talked about a little bit. We've been kind of all over the place in terms of care. For ourselves, for our partners, for our relationships. There's MS impacts all of those. But what is something for yourself that you plan to be intentional about with your care going forward? And it doesn't have to be something necessarily that you learned, but maybe it's communication. Maybe it's that you're going to find some ways to communicate with your spouse. Maybe it's creating that safe space to talk about expectations, because when we're on two different opposing expectations, that can be really hard, because it's hard to feel like that you can that you both are on the same team if you're both thinking that you're doing other things, or you should be doing other things. Or even, making space to kind of talk about emotions, maybe making intention and time to do something fun. We have someone here, Dion, that's going to work on boundaries. And boundaries are a great thing to work on. That's how we, kind of protect our space and our energy. Boundaries are a great way how, anyone can protect, the things that matter the most to them. Nora's going to use notebooks, giving myself time, space, and patience. Kenita said taking time for exercise. So thinking about that action plan, or thinking about, some ways that you can, or you can give yourself permission to exercise, but allow it to look different. Depending, I know for my MS, it looks different from based on the season and the time of year. So we have some good things here. Quality time with loved ones. We are definitely coming up on a holiday tomorrow and this weekend, and over the next month. It will be kind of busy. So making your experience with your loved ones matter. Looking for the small things. There are really big things to be grateful for. That happen here and there, but there's small little things that happen all the time, and that can help you really appreciate and enjoy the everyday experiences. And so I'm going to read the last couple of things here. So Den and Jennifer are going to be intentional about taking time for yourself and not feeling guilty about it. And Carol is going to be researching on how to educate her husband on MS and how it relates to my everyday activities. Carol, there are a lot of really good resources that you can share with your husband. And I would start with either MS Views and News, or the National MS Society. And there's really just some beginner information, but also one of the best things you might be able to do, if there's a support group in your area, or if there's a way to connect your husband with another husband of someone with MS, that might be helpful too, because I know sometimes we benefit from talking with someone who is in our situation. And if you've been on this call before, I don't say goodbye. I say I'll see you later. I live in North Carolina, so this is a map of where I'm pretty close to. But I want you to know that I am incredibly grateful for each of you for taking this evening out and to participate in the mental wellness chat. Mental health really matters. You are not alone, and that is really important to know. And I hope that you guys have a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving, and call your friends, bring yourself community if you're feeling lonely, because you are not alone. Find some people to talk with. And happy Thanksgiving. I'll see you next month.